Hi, Jenna, and welcome to EntrepreneurCast. It's such a great privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very excited.
So, Jenna, before we get into the business side of things, why don't you tell us a little bit about who are you outside of your business?
It's actually quite a tough question because I think when you start a startup, there doesn't really exist much outside of business. But me in a nutshell, so basically there's a few things that I do on the side that I really enjoy. So I'm a massive runner in the forest, just go out for lots of trail running. I also love baking and I'm a wife and a mum. So I think those kind of take up quite a lot of my outside time of business, but I love it.
And what about your business? What's your business about? What is it that you do, and what inspired you to start it?
Yeah, sure. So we are called Tadaweb. What we focus on is small data. So in a world where now everyone's focusing on the idea of big data, we have a much more human approach to web data sort of collection and analysis. So at our base, we're a technology company, pure and simple. And basically, my co-founder spent about 15 years building out the technology, and I never ever thought I'd join him in creating what's now Tada. We're living in Brussels and then decided, he wanted to work on the company and I was doing my master's, and I thought at the end, this is such an opportunity not to be missed. And so I jumped on board, and he provided sort of the technical glue and I provided sort of the everything non-technical glue, and we just seemed to make a good team, and that's basically how the idea came about.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's a crazy journey.
So, what would you say was your biggest challenge, and how did you manage to overcome it?
So I think there's been a number of challenges. The journey of an entrepreneur is full of challenges, and it's sort of reacting to those in the right way is what gets you through. I think in the beginning, just sort of being so young when you start a company, and particularly when you start a technology company, because not only was I young, I was also female. And you don't often see those kind of profiles on the boards and at the forefront of these kind of companies. So just initially getting over that kind of bias, and I wouldn't even say from other people, but more in myself, just understanding that, say I'm young, but I have a voice. And so that was a big challenge initially. Another challenge was, on a more product side, we were building a platform that could essentially target any market because we could work with any type of data. And, every single person we spoke to had a different view on how we could use our technology. It could be B2B, it could be B2C, it could be in finance, it could be in real estate. And it was a really, really big challenge for us as the founders of the company to actually snipe it in on the market that we wanted and first of all, find it.
So, what was your biggest breakthrough, you would say?
Biggest breakthrough, I think, was definitely, well, we've had a few, but I think when we really nailed down our product market fit. So, as a startup, I think the biggest killer of any startup is an inability to find a tight enough product market fit. And so, as I mentioned, we just spent a lot of time testing, really trying to find the market that needed a painkiller rather than a vitamin. And also had a nice checkbook, and also had a nice use of our technology. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here for our technology, and if it's not being used how we kind of foresee it, it's tough for us. And so, when we just really nailed in on our market, when we started to see the results, when we started to see them appreciating the technology, and of course, when they started paying for it, it was just really exciting.
So, before you got involved in techie company, have you been quite techie yourself, or did you just get around to it and jumped in with both feet?
So I actually wrote a blog the other day on sort of Sheryl Sandberg's idea of the corporate playground rather than the corporate ladder. And I think that's very, very true for me. So my background is actually in psychology and law and international relations. So it's very far from the tech world. I think, as a co-founder of a technology company, you kind of on a pretty steep learning curve in quite a small amount of time. So I wouldn't call myself a techie, I'm far from it, but at least I understand sort of a lot about our technology and how we can change that into a language that non-techies can understand.
So, where would you say you come up with your best ideas?
I think when I'm running, when I'm in the middle of the forest and I'm just surrounded by nature and I'm just running and I'm just really not having to think too much about anything else but one foot in front of the other. And I have this mental clarity to kind of just take a step back and think, okay, that would be cool to do, or what's a really big challenge we can do, or what's someone that, who's a person that doesn't believe where we're going, and just really try and flesh out, okay, how do I want to get there? And I do that a lot when I run.
That's very similar to my. I don't really run. I'm not a huge fan of running, but I do work out, and sometimes that happens. Just something just happens when you work out. The thoughts start popping in, then you have to stop everything, write it
Yeah.
down. Do you
We need to
run with a
invent a better
notepad?
system to record it. Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So Jenna, we all have someone at some point that we looked up to and who inspired us. Do you have any personal heroes?
I have quite a few actually. I think that's key to success is just having people that you look up to, and people that you can, that sort of mentor if you want. But I'm not a big fan of that word. But just people that you understand. So I think I have a particular woman where I'm in Luxembourg, that's kind of been on the same journey as me. So she's had a company, she's sold it, now she's investing, and she's really into things that matter to me as well, social impact. And so, just having someone like her from day one of the company, when I was nothing, I didn't have a name for myself, I didn't know anything, yet she still dedicated time for me. And now, over these years and years and years, we've developed to be good friends. But so on a local level, I have that kind of mentory kind of profile, which is really important to me. But I think on an overreaching kind of global level, I think people like Elon Musk, it's quite typical, but for me, he is just someone. I finished reading his book a couple of weeks ago, so I think that's why I'm so excited. But just really challenge the definition of disruption. I mean, who would ever think that you could potentially have a colony on Mars? Who would, he talks about going back and thinking about technology as what we dreamed it to be years ago. So, flying cars, and he's really bringing back the hope of technology and where it should go. So that's someone I really appreciate.
So you also obviously have quite a few years now in business and entrepreneurship, and you started out of nowhere and you went pretty far. So what kind of top three tips and strategies you could, in a nutshell, kind of give to our audience that could help us?
Yeah. So firstly, it feels like I've been in this a long time, but I mean, 5 years has gone so fast, and there's a lot of people that know a lot more than me. But I think just on my kind of personal side, I think the first and foremost for anything you want to achieve in life is you have to work hard. There's no ifs and buts. There's no secret sauce. There's no magic pill. There's nothing really, in my opinion, that works better than hard work when you want to be successful. So that's number one. Number two, as I mentioned, before you do anything, you have to test the market. If there's not an opportunity, there's so many resources and so many hopes that are lost because people just don't spend enough time early on understanding the lay of the land. So test the market. And number three, I would say get good mentors, get good advisors early on. I don't know, I mean, corporate tax law or, accounting, human resources, all these things I absolutely had no idea about. And we had such good advisors that I could just go to and say, how do I hire for this profile? Or how do I do this? Or what does this number mean? So number three would definitely be get good advisors.
Out of that, I will actually ask another question out of mentorship because I totally agree. Getting a mentor or a coach is so important because you need to get that support and knowledge from someone else as well. But how do you go about finding that fit, finding the person who will actually respond to you and say, yes, I'll find time for you and I will help out and be there for you?
Yeah, I get this all the time, and I have, I speak at a lot of events, and I have, sort of younger entrepreneurs coming up to me and saying, will you be my mentor? And I say, of course, it gives us my email. But I think as much as I wish there was a secret formula for finding your ideal mentor, I just think it has to happen naturally as well. And so I think maybe the matching process of mentor and, entrepreneur or whatever is not easy and not sort of easy to understand. I think what you need to do is you just need to network as much as possible, and try and let these things happen naturally. Just try and talk, try and make connections with people, give them your card. I think it has to be a natural progression from networking rather than a set mentoring program where we think this profile will work with this profile. I think that's, there's no secret sauce for me anyway.
Brilliant. So you're quite a big advocate of networking.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think, the only way to achieve something is when you have a whole bunch of hands involved, and networking definitely helps that.
You also mentioned that you speak quite a lot. Tell us a little bit about your speaking career. How did it come about, and how was it for you to go from just starting a startup and then start speaking to people? Because they say that it's like a number one fear.
I think everyone has strengths and weaknesses. I think, most of my friends and family will say that I've always been quite outspoken. But again, I agree, speaking in front of a whole bunch of people is not the same. So I think my passion actually started in secondary school. So I was a leader of my school. I had a lot of speech competitions, and I just loved being in front and just saying my opinion to the world and just trying to empower people. So I think from quite early on, I've always enjoyed public speaking. I think when I moved to Europe and I was living in a place where English wasn't the mother tongue, and then I had to all of a sudden try and explain in French, I think that's when I get a little bit more action. But I think I've been trying to be the face of my company since it started. And so I've been speaking a lot. And I think what I've noticed is I've just got more confident. The more you do it and the more you just take risks and the more you get used to it, the more confident you'll be. So just don't, my advice is totally just for anyone that gets an opportunity, never, never, ever turn it down.
In all these years, obviously, plus you are in techie company, did you come across any sort of resources that could help a startup or an entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure. So I think as I explained, I don't have a background that's necessarily fits exactly with the company immediately anyway. And so I spent a lot of time reading. Anything I didn't understand, I would just go on Amazon and I'd buy a book about it. And there's a lot to be had in books, but there's also a lot to be had in experience. So books such as The Lean Startup and sort of just understanding different ways of doing things and different approaches. Going back to the networking point, I think anyone, even if their company hasn't started, they need business cards because you have to make a mark on the world and you have to go out there. So whenever I see the students from one of the lectures I do for the Masters of Entrepreneurship, and I say, how many of you guys actually have business cards right now? And if only two put their hand up, I'm like, guys, just print yourself some business cards and give it to people and make a name for yourself. So I think business cards are definitely an amazing resource. And last one, me being a massive fan of Audible. So basically listening, I love sort of optimizing my time and multitasking. A fantastic resource is Audible because you can do sort of MBAs, lecture series from some of, Harvard and some of the leading professors for like $19 or something or eight, and so you have access to this amazing wealth of knowledge through Audible. So I would definitely say Audible.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. And I hear from a lot of successful people that at some point they came across a book that changed their life. Did you have that kind of book, and what was it?
So I'm again not going to be very original because there's a lot of books that have changed me profound. But I think I'm sort of got a recency bias with the fact that there's two that I read not this fall last year that really changed me. So Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. It's really kind of your typical female entrepreneurship book, but especially having being a working couple with my husband, of just both of us having really really sort of stressful busy jobs, and just how do you actually manage that, and just by getting sort of the empowerment to say, okay, no, this is going to be a split job. We can do this together, and he's amazing at it. So, and just really getting the sort of the power to lean in essentially. So that was definitely one. And the second one, again, not really original, but it's the Elon Musk book. So just understanding a completely new way of disrupting. So just changing my mentality completely when I plan for the roadmap and do a whole bunch of work, is just have really big dreams and just go for it and don't listen to anyone.
You obviously achieved quite a lot already, and you're doing pretty well juggling
Thanks.
home life and business. What is next for you? Where are you aiming? And you never know who's listening. If there is a person in the audience who could help you to achieve that, who would that be?
Yeah, sure. So I'm this is just kind of for me a stepping stone of where I want to go, or maybe sort of a more leap board, hopefully I should say. I have a whole bunch of projects that I want to do. I think the start of it was last year when I launched my first scholarship fund. So at my old high school in New Zealand, and It was basically a scholarship that will be given out once a year to a female student going on to study STEM in university. So, just the idea of empowering the younger, the emerging up and coming generation, for me, that's something that's really important to me and right now and moving forward. So I definitely want to continue doing that. I also, want to build a more socially driven company, sort of more on social impact, get more in that space. And then later I want to probably move back to New Zealand and start my restaurant because I love cooking. So I think there's lots of things in the pipeline, but my next step is definitely trying to empower, the both female and male sort of upcoming generation to really think about society and where the future's going.
That sounds great. You have a lot coming up to you. And if you ever open a restaurant, let me know. I'll have to fly in and dine there. The only thing is I'm vegan.
I'm sure we'll
So
find a solution.
brilliant. So we are just about to wrap up, but before we say our goodbyes, is there anything else you would like to advise or share with our audience?
Yeah, I think, you know, for everyone working, and thinking about working, I think it's all, as I mentioned, about people. And I think, just networking as much as possible and going to events and, there's a lot to be said about the power of working together. So I'll be speaking at a lot of conferences coming up this year. If you hear about them, or if you hear my name, or if you want more information, don't hesitate to contact me. I think the more people we can meet and the more we can just really work on this whole amazing opportunity together, the better. So don't be afraid to network and keep in touch if anyone wants to get in touch.
That's awesome. And what were your contact details? How can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So on Twitter is a really good channel. So it's at Genna Elvin. I also have a blog, which is gennaelvin.tumblr.com. And, people can just contact me via my company site at Tadaweb. So any way you guys want to reach out, I'm more than happy to hear your story.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, you're at a conference and you had to pop out. So I really appreciate you making that time for us today. And I really look forward to witnessing your journey and your future success. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best.